Hello guys, welcome back to another episode here on European Confessions. There is a message that I want to share with you guys, and the message reads like this. Hello brother Nashi, how are you? Can you please post for me as anonymous? I have my own confession that I want to share with you, and my confession, it goes on like this. When I got married to my husband, I cannot say that me and my husband were poor, because I was working as a professional as well as my husband. He was working as a professional, but it was a matter of us just surviving because we were still paying off our house. So it was just a matter of me and him helping each other so that we can pay rent and to buy food. And the house that we had gotten through the bank, it was quite expensive for us because we had deliberately chosen this house in a neighborhood whereby things were really expensive, and for you to have any back rooms in that neighborhood where we were staying and repaying off this bond, it was in a neighborhood whereby they didn't allow people to have any back rooms at all. And if you wanted any back room, then you needed to go to the bank. It was quite a big hassle for you to get an approval to build a back room. Things got worse for us. This was after my husband and his other friend, they had a discussion, and they came and they presented their business deal to me, even though my husband was not that convinced. So his friend had promised him a very big contract in the event, he said, if we were going to start off a big company. And he had looked at my husband's credit profile, and my husband's credit profile was really great. So our family friend said that if we were going to take a huge bank loan, we could make enough money and we would pay off that bank loan, and at the same time we would have gotten a very big extra boost and an extra income, and we will be able to buy assets. So me and my husband, we then went to the bank and we applied for the loan. Since this was a quite huge sum of money, it took a very long time for it to be approved by the bank. When the bank was about to approve this loan, they called me and my husband to go to the bank, and our friend told us that just in case if they were going to make it to be a security-based loan, we were supposed to offer our house, which I had refused. By the time that we arrived at the bank, my husband had convinced me that just in case we were supposed to agree, because we had been going up and down and this was getting boring for my husband. He just wanted us to start off this business so as to see if we were going to make some money. After we had spoken with the banker, he then offered us a loan which was a security-based loan, and for us to get that security-based loan, we had to give the bank our house just in case if we were going to fail to pay off that bank loan, then the bank was going to repossess our house. I was scared, my brother, because for the past 12 or more years we had been paying off the house, and this was too much for me. But anyway, we needed this money. After we had signed off our house and given it back to the bank, then we were given that money. But this was like our only investment that we had, this house that we had bought through the bank. My husband's friend, we then linked him up with that business account because we wanted to have him the ball rolling, and we wanted him to focus on his projections. But instead of him focusing on his initial projections, that one that we had applied the bank loan for, the guy then started gambling with our house. He said that since we had enough money to start a fast food restaurant, it was far much better to start with a fast food restaurant. His idea was that even if you are poor, but one day when you are in town, you will end up buying a pizza and will be making a lot of money. He said that instead of us starting from the ground, we should rather just join a popular pizza franchise that is available in our country, and we can start making money. And that was fair enough for us. We then gave him the go ahead to apply for that pizza food outlet. Everything was going great until when the COVID pandemic came. When the COVID pandemic came, we watched in absolute horror as the lockdowns were being implemented and we were bleeding money on a daily basis. We watched as our savings were dwindling down, and 2 years later, when the world returned to normality, we had lost all of that bank loan and some of our savings, and we were left with a huge debt to pay, including the house that had to be repaid on a monthly basis. Our friend, looking at our situation, said that it was far much better that we go and visit this other charismatic pastor who is quite popular in our country. We then went to that church, and to our surprise, for you to have a one-on-one meeting with that pastor, all that you have to do was that you had to pay the registration fee so that you can see the pastor, and we had to pay that money, and this was like our last money. Even the previous month we had sold our car so that we can cover the expenses. After paying that huge sum of money, we then had a one-on-one session with the pastor. The pastor then told my husband that for us to succeed in life, it was going to be very impossible, because when he was looking at me with the eyes of the spirit, he had seen that in my womb I was carrying a spirit of poverty, and this spirit of poverty had been inserted into my womb by my grandmother at the time when my mother had given birth to me. And he then said that I had to forgive my grandmother because she did this out of bitterness. What had happened is that my grandmother failed to accept me because my father, who had impregnated my mother at that time, had denied the pregnancy because he was a married man and he was dating my mother, who was still underaged at that time. She was still in high school. So when my mother informed my grandmother about the pregnancy, they went and they informed the man whom she was claiming to have impregnated her, but my father refused. Though later on he came and he apologized, but this made my grandmother to be very bitter, and he said that the reason as to why he had refused that he was the one who had impregnated my mother, it was because he was scared of going to jail since my mom was underaged. So after that, this gave my grandmother a lot of bitterness. So the pastor was saying that at the time when my mother gave birth to me, my grandmother, each and every time when she would look at me, she will just see the image of my father. That is why she ended up cursing me and giving me that spirit of poverty. The pastor then started praying for me, and when the pastor was praying for me and my husband, he suggested that the next day we were supposed to come. But when we were about to leave, the pastor's wife then spoke with me. We were just having a ladies' talk, and she said, when you come tomorrow, try not to bring your friend, the one who brought all of these problems into your life. The next evening, straight from work, me and my husband, we then went to the pastor's house. The pastor's including the pastor's wife, started praying for me, and I started to feel like there was something that was moving in my womb. So the pastor's wife had said that if I was going to feel anything in my womb, I was supposed to tell her. I then told her that I was feeling that there was something that was moving in my womb. She took me into one of the bathroom, but when we were in the bathroom, she said, I am coming back. She then went back into that living room where I had left the pastor and my husband. They were just talking, and when the pastor's wife left me, and the next time around when I saw the door being opened, it was not the pastor's wife, but it was the pastor himself. He then said that he wanted to pray for me in that bathroom. He started praying for me whilst he was holding my stomach. He was just placing his hand on my stomach, then he started shifting his hands until I felt that he had inserted his fingers in my private parts. And he said that this thing that had happened, I was not supposed to tell my husband about this, otherwise the evil spirit would return back into my womb. The pastor touched me until I felt like I wanted to sleep with a man, and he said that this was not the correct time for me to be acting in such a way. I don't know how I was supposed to act when he was touching me like that. He then said that I should regularly visit him for the full treatment of of the delivery session. I kept on going back to him. This was after my husband had already given up because the situation, according to him, had not changed one little bit. One day I called the pastor. On that day, my husband had spoken to me about maybe if it was much better for him to end his own life. He had sent me a text message and he said that I think that it is far much better for me to die than for me to watch my family suffering like this. And I then forwarded that text message to the pastor. Then the pastor said, like, ASAP, I want you to come to my offices right now. So he gave me the address and he said that if I was going to come to his office, he was going to give me something when I would have arrived there. When I arrived there, he gave me an envelope. This envelope, it was full of money. And this money, when he made me to count this money in front of him, this money, I found out that it was enough for 4 months. And this was going to be able to repay our loans for 4 months. And after I had counted the money, this was just too much for me. So I then asked him if he wanted to sleep with me. Since that night, the way that he had touched me, it was just very weird for a pastor to touch another man's wife like that. And he said that, yes, he was attracted to me, but after he had been attracted to me, he then spoke with his spiritual father about that issue, and he had been forbidden, as difficult as it was to sleep with me, but he had been given the go-ahead to help me and my husband spiritually, but he could not help my husband directly. He could only help my husband through me, since I was like a vessel to him, so that if there can be any physical manifestation of money, then I would use that money to make all of our problems go away. At that time, he was already removing my clothes when he was speaking with me about that issue. He then said, instead of me sleeping with him for a few bucks, it was far much better that if I do the prayers with him accordingly, I could get something from him that will give me great wealth. And I said, whatever it is, I receive, all men of God. The next step that he did is that he said that we had to do what is called a Daniel fast. And he said that after doing this Daniel's fast, I was going to receive the blessings of God like I had never received them in my life. At that time, he was already removing my clothes. He then said that instead of me sleeping with him for the few bucks, I should focus on this Daniel's fast. I then went back home. And when I went back home, I told my husband about this Daniel's fast. And my husband, since he had struggled a lot, he said that he was not willing to go on this fasting prayer because he had seen that prayer does not work at all. I then reported back this issue back to the pastor. Then the pastor said that I should not mind like my husband, because this was a war that I had to fight on my own, and I had to focus on me as a vessel, and I had to make sure that I prepare myself that when it is time for me to receive the gifts that God was going to pour upon my life, I was going to be like a vessel that will be ready already. I went on that Daniel fasting. Then one day when I was at work, it was in the afternoon, he then called me and he told me that we had to go on this other mountain so that we can pray, so that he can release me from this fasting period that he had given me. I then excluded myself from work, and he came and he picked me up, and we went to this other remote mountain, but not very far from town. When we went there, I was then given a clay plate. After he had given me this clay plate that was at the back of his car, it was not that big, but I think that this clay plate that he gave me, it was very big, so much that it can actually hold about 2 liters of water. I then started praying once we had climbed up the mountain, but I was surprised because this prayer that he was doing, it was nothing but a satanic prayer. He then told me to wash my private parts with the water that he had in this other gym water bottle that he had taken from his car. So the way that I was washing my private parts, I had placed that clay plate that he had given me just between my legs whilst I was squatting. I then started washing my private parts, thinking that he wanted to sleep with me. And after that, he said that I should urinate, and after I had urinated, I had to wash again my private parts, and all of these fluids were flowing into that clay plate that I had placed just underneath my legs when I was squatting like that. After I was done, he gave me more prayers, and we then returned back to the car. I was still feeling confused about this way that he had performed his prayers. When we returned back to the car, he then told me that if I was willing to do all of this, he was going to pray for me so that God can give me more blessing, in which I agreed because I didn't know what to do anymore about my situation that me and my husband we were facing. And he told me that whilst I was on my period each and every morning, I was supposed to wake up, and throughout the night I had to make sure that I would not urinate. Even if I felt like I wanted to urinate, I had to keep that urine until the morning. Then I had to urinate inside that clay plate that he had given me. And he said that I was supposed to place this clay plate inside another bucket just in case if there is any urine that will spill over. I had to use that urine, not to throw it away. I had to mix that spilled over urine with water. Then I had to go and buy some water bottles, and these water bottles I should place them in a fridge. Then on the day when I would have finished performing these rituals, I should remove them from the fridge, wash them with that water that I would have mixed with urine, and I should go into town and I should just donate it to those people that are homeless. And this was like a routine that I had to follow, so that the evil spirit that he had claimed was inside my womb had to be chased away. The first time that I performed this ritual, I saw that me and my husband's fortunes, they suddenly changed. My husband was not supposed to know this secret. So I said, how am I going to keep this secret safe? I then returned back home and I told my mom that I wanted to keep my spare bedroom. She then kicked out the person whom was renting that spare bedroom of mine, and I then started buying some property like a bed, just a few of my belongings. And I told my mom that whenever I feel like I am missing home, I'll be coming back so as to sleep again in my spare bedroom. And I pretended as if this was nothing but for memories' sake, and I changed the locks on my door. My mom anyway is old, and each and every time that I pay her a visit so as to perform this ritual, she is more than happy to have me at home with her. So when I am on my periods, I go back to my parents' house where I keep this wooden plate just underneath that bed, and the period blood and urine, sometimes when I finish urinating in that wooden plate, it will mysteriously disappear. Whenever I perform this ritual, after doing this, I dip those water bottles that I keep in the fridge at my mom's place in that bucket as per that ritual, and I go out and I give those water bottles to homeless persons. Sometimes I can even drive for hours and hours searching them out. When our business started getting a lot of success, my husband then became so prayerful, so much that even today we both attend the pastor's church. As for the pastor, he did something that was quite strange, because after we had become successful, when I approached him with a gift, he acted as if he knew nothing about this gift that I wanted to give him, and it all confused me. When he said that this was nothing but the Lord's work, he said, this is the Lord's work, not mine. So do your part, give to the poor, pay your tithing in time so as to please the Lord. He then smiled and he walked away. So this has left me with so much confusion. Every month I do that routine whereby I urinate in that clay plate that was given to me by that pastor, even though now he claims as if he has forgotten everything that he did for me. And when should I stop doing this? I don't know, because my pastor, he has been avoiding me ever since we did this ritual. Each and every time when I try to go and visit him whilst he is at the office, he makes sure that I find him whilst he is having someone, because for you to see him, it is by appointment only. As for his wife, even at church after church, when I try to approach her, always she will call someone so that I won't have that time to ask her about those rituals that her husband made me to perform.